All right, so that's going on. TheAthletic.com today. And I was asked about a couple of the Baylor coaches, and towards the bottom of this poll, there I think are 38 or 40 names. They rated from 1 to 38 or 40 the all-time hires as head football coaches in Big 12 history, which eliminates Bill Snyder, the first era. It eliminates it eliminates Gary Patterson because he was a part of the Mountain West, I guess, at the time. So this is anybody that's been hired since the Big 12 formed in 96. It includes Mack Brown, Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley, includes Mike Leach. It includes a lot. It also includes Guy Morris, Kevin Steele, Dave Roberts, Matt Rhule, and Art Briles. And Dave Aranda has not been on the job long enough to be a part of this poll or this list. And Max Olson and Sam Kahn are the ones who helped put this together along with other staff. And in fact, they called me about, okay, I'm going to ask you this. Roberts, Morris, and Steele. I said, this is what I said. Morris, of the three, Morris would be 1. Then Roberts would be well below that at 2. And then there would be another drop-off to Kevin Steele, correct?
Yes, yeah. You know, and one of the things that people outside of Waco may not realize is that in spite of the fact that Guy Morris didn't win a whole hill of beans of games here, he won more than his predecessors did. And he was the one who started to convince Baylor people what even Coach Taft couldn't do, which still blows my mind that they wouldn't listen to him, but that – yes, you need modern facilities here. You need better facility. You need an indoor facility. You need, part of the reason that, some of these teams can practice and Baylor can't is because when it rains, Baylor's got to go inside and they can't do anything. But Texas A&M and Texas and all these teams that could play even before the facilities got all that fancy, they had an indoor.
Yeah, they
had something that could go inside.
There were high schools who had.
Well, yeah, maybe what happened is South Lake Carroll got it. And then Guy was like, guys,
I know.
Come on.
There's a 1 through whatever. I shared it with Craig and I shared it with Paul, and I think I sent it to Jack and Armstrong as well. It's a long story. I printed the whole thing out. It's like 20-something pages. But we're going to go down that list, and we're going to get your feedback when we can. In fact, right now, we're going to give you the top 5 to 10. We're going to tell you where Art Briles is, which, of course, is going to be a lightning rod if he's too high or he's too low or he shouldn't be on the list. And remember now, Bill Snyder can be on the list because he was hired a second time, but it does not include him or Osborne or anybody that was hired prior to the Big 12 forming in 1996. So let me ask you this, because Snyder, who would be, if you included Snyder, era 1, and you included Patterson, who would be your top 5 among Stoops, Snyder, era 1, Patterson, Mack Brown, and Osborne wouldn't count because he ended 2 years after the Big 12.
I thought Patterson didn't count. So does he count?
He doesn't. He doesn't. Well, Osborne would be 1. Well, maybe I'm a little biased there. Would Osborne be 1?
Well, does he count or does he not count?
No,
he just wasn't in it too long enough.
Because if he did, you counted all the way back to 72, and that would be enough.
So, we need to set the parameters so we know
so Patterson doesn't count. Era 1 of Bill Snyder doesn't count. It's who has been hired since the Big 12 formed. It's Stoops and Mack Brown and Snyder, too, and obviously others along the way. Lincoln Riley, whoever else.
Yeah, I think the top 2 are Bob Stoops because of the sustainability of what Oklahoma has done. Mack Brown, number 2, because he and Stoops are the only 2 who have won national titles in the league, although it's been a long time for both of them. I think I'm going to put Bill Snyder number 2 at
era 2
at 3 because they had it was, if they had not done that, who knows where Kansas State would be right now. Had they start kind of trying to recycle, more guys like Ron Prince, like they would have been in trouble. I think Lincoln Riley 4 because I think he is taking over for Bob Stoops, and at this point he doesn't really have any Stoops guys anymore.
All right,
and is sustaining.
You go all the way to 5 for me.
Yeah, and then Matt Campbell
ahead of Gundy and Leach.
Because
ahead of Gary Pinkel.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because Matt Campbell has done something at Iowa State that no one else could do, is that he has made them feared and people think it's sustainable.
Okay.
And I think it is, as long as he's there, I think he can sustain.
All right, Craig, you give me your 5 among the ones that are eligible.
Bob Stoops is number 1. Mack Brown's number 2. They both have titles, but Stoops kicked Mack's ass all the time. Yeah. So Mack doesn't belong above him. So those are the top 2. I think those are the very clear 2. Looking at that rest of the list, I got to say Lincoln Riley an edge above Mike Gundy. Lincoln Riley, being in the playoff a couple of times already, winning the Big 12 more times than everybody else has, basically, other than Stoops and Mack Brown for the most part. I put Lincoln there. I mean, the dude's lost less than 10 games in his time at Oklahoma and has just basically taken not a dynasty, but taken a top shelf program and just kept it going. And that's not easy to always do. So I put Lincoln there, Gundy 4. I like their top 5. Now I'm looking at it. Mike Leach has got to be up there.
Yeah, so Stoops, Mack, Lincoln Riley, Mike Gundy, and Mike Leach.
I think I'm kind of good with that one, yeah. I wouldn't put Snyder 2. I know what Snyder 2 meant to K-State as far as keeping it afloat, but they didn't really win. And winning matters to me. So I couldn't put him above Riley or guys who have won big trophies.
Open the lines up, Paul. Yeah, okay. 254-339-1122. You give us your 5. These are coaches who were hired after the Big 12 form.
And part of me wants to put Briles in the top 5 because of what he did, but the thing is that he did it, and no matter what the level of his involvement in the undoing, he had a part of the undoing. Like, he was part of that. His decisions were part of the unraveling. It wasn't, it was all part of a big salad of crap. So, but he was part of that, so I have to take him slightly out of the top 5. But I thought he was rated too low at top 12, right?
Okay, yeah, he's at 12. And now let's look who else, because this is going to be something. I think this will get some feedback from you. And again, some of the responses to the article, because I looked at about 8 or 10 of them, were like Tom Herman's too high. How did Charlie Strong not finish at the bottom? Well, that goes to tell you how bad other coaches have been in the Big 12. Number 6 is Pinkel, who did a great job at Missouri. Snyder era 2 is 7. Matt Campbell is 8. Frank Solich is 9. And Nebraska, when he got fired, his record was really good. And then Matt Rule is 10. Bo Pelini, whose record was really good and almost beat a hell of a UT team, he's 11. We know why he got fired. He's just lost his you-know-what. And Art Briles is 12. I think Briles needs to be in the top 5. The question is, where do I put him in the top 5? And then if you take the overall thing, as good as what he did in winning those Big 12 titles and bringing them out of the doldrums, he also was a part of the wreckage no matter how much.
Yeah, I mean, he's attached to it no matter what involvement or not. And, for all I didn't know this was going on or we did this correctly, and I believe some of that is true. I mean, there's just no saying that, you just can say you're completely hands-free, clean, and never did anything wrong. I refuse to believe that. That not everything unfolds the way that it did if everybody did what they were supposed to do. So I can only believe that to a certain extent. I mean, it's, his ranking is all the scandal. I mean, that's what it is. If not for that and the way the program came, crumbling down in so many ways, he's probably number 3 on this list, because of where Baylor was before him to where they are now. And he's probably got a couple of extra Big 12 titles, so he'd probably have about 4 of them right now. May even have a playoff appearance at this point. And I don't think it's crazy to think that way because of the trajectory that they were on. So
they were loaded up.
Yeah, he would have probably been number 3 on this list, but because of what happened, you have to take that into account and drop him lower. I mean, they got him next to Mark Mangino, who actually did have a good stint at Kansas. They have him above Mangino. But, this is all scandal-related.
Guy Morris, 30th. Dave Roberts, 35th. Kevin Steele, 36. Charlie Weiss, last on the list, is 37. Les Miles was ranked twice with his time at Oklahoma State, which was good, and then also his disaster at Kansas, which ended back earlier in the year. Is there any question at all? The debate, Craig, you answered this for me, but I was going to ask this question. 254-339-1122. Stoops over Mack at 1 and 2. Oklahoma, since the 70s, has been year in and year out better than Texas. Now, the overall series, Texas owns that. But since the 70s,
not by as much as they used to.
No, I know. You kind of get that thing tightened up. There was a time, though, Mack Brown took Texas out of what was a disastrous year in 96. And it was right after the Big 12 form, but yet they won. 97 is when the 90, 8 was his first year Ricky Williams Heisman Trophy, with Makovic having 97. But it's not like UT was Kansas State. It's not like they were Baylor. It's not like they were Iowa State. It's not like they were them. So I think that you, because of head-to-head, and it wasn't like 15-5. I don't know what the head-to-head was, but it was enough. And big moments as well. And it took Vince Young to turn the tide a little bit. So Stoops 1, Mack 2. I don't think there's any question that's the 1 and 2. Lincoln Riley still has a long way to go.
I mean,
Matt Campbell still has a long way to go, and that's kind of high for him. But again, I understand what he's accomplished. He hadn't been there that long. Hell, who knows? Maybe he could end up having his own problems in the end. But we'll see.
1-2, there's not an argument.
Yeah.
There's not an argument to be made. They have national titles. That's bottom line, point blank. You can't argue Mack and Stoops, and I don't think you can really argue Mack versus Stoops either, because they negate each other with the national titles, and then the head-to-head record, it's very clearly in Stoops' favor. Big 12 titles clearly in Stoops' favor. So, yeah, I think those are the top two cemented. And then it's interesting to hear what everybody, will say after those guys. And just looking, the all-time UTOU 62-49.
Yeah, and it used to be worse than that.
Oh, it used to be a lot worse.
And, of course, UT dominated everybody that they've played over the years. The only one they never seemed to do was Kansas State because of the Big 12 forming. They dominate the A&M series. They eventually took complete control of the series in a short term over Nebraska as well. That used to be like they'd played twice. All right, here's the text story, then we'll go to the phone lines. Let's make this about top 5 coaches since the Big 12 was formed. This does not include Gary Patterson, which some of you wouldn't want to do that anyway, but he would be in the mix. It does not include Osborne. It does not include Bill Snyder, era 1. It's since the Big 12 was formed. Here's from Scotty B. I would have Stoops 1, Mack 2. 3, 4, and 5 would be Lincoln Riley, Mike Gundy at 4, Matt Campbell at 5. From the 817 who's driving, thanks for doing that anyway. Stoops, Mack, Riley, Gundy, and Briles, from where Baylor was back-to-back titles and a Heisman Trophy. Winningest era in school history. Riley would be the only one going to the playoffs. Wouldn't be the only one going to the playoffs for the Big 12, because Briles might have taken Baylor to that point. We just don't know.
I think that's one of my just selfish biggest regrets from everything it's not the biggest one, but like just entertainment-wise, the fact that we didn't get like 3 or 4 years of Briles versus Riley is really a shame, because that would have been some insane football offensively, and we never got to see it. And that sucks, man. I think that would have been a great little rivalry between two offensive masterminds. But Briles on paper, what he did, just bottom line, like I said a few minutes ago, I'd probably have him at like 3 or 4 if that was. I mean, especially because like I said, in the 5 years since that happened, he would have added more. There would have been at least another Big 12 title, in my opinion, at least, knocking on the playoff door again. So
with the class he had coming in,
along with who they had coming back for 15.
Yeah.
Seth Russell.
They were 6-0 until they melted down.
Yeah, with all that coming back and the things that they had loaded up, and all they needed, all Art would have really needed was one. Like, listen, he goes to the playoff as the 4 seed, gets his ass handed to him by Alabama, 58 to 28. It wouldn't have mattered, because they've been like, look what I just did.
Well, what he needed was a non-conference game.
Yeah.
A big win in a non-conference game, and not a Holiday Bowl or whatever. That would have been the one thing that puts them over the top. Their classes were sealed to be really, really good. This is not to bring up the old scars. This is to try to say, where are they? And we're about to take your calls at 254-339-1122.
And so I almost think for him in particular, there has to be like an asterisk of sorts, of pre and post scandal, kind of, because there's 2 ways to view it. There is the before that happened, but then that did happen. So,
Well, it's all, yeah,
right. It's
kind of hard.
Before, yes, he's like top 5 easily. After, put him at the bottom because of, what it caused. But we'll let everybody kind of explain their reasoning, I guess.
All right, we will go over the entire list at some point, and I know that Jack put this together on the graphics, which is great, along with Paul's 2-5 at 5:55 and 3:05 today. It's great work by Jack on this. It's too early. They say it's too early to have Aranda. Jim Grove was not a part of this, because that kind of almost is still the Briles era, and of course we know how that ended 7-6. Top hires since the Big 12 formed. We'll kind of go over this, and we'll stop whenever we need to have a discussion. We've told you the top 10. Stoops, Mack, Lincoln.
Hey, I think we need to call special attention to the bottom 6.
Okay. Well, let me give you some of the guys. Let me just kind of touch on a few others. We mentioned the top 12. All right?
I will say, I know that a lot of people are with T-Rex, and I'm not actually all the way opposed to this idea, but Matt Rhule's first year shouldn't have been as bad as 1-11. It shouldn't have been. So I do agree with him to an extent, and Matt Rhule was around such a short amount of time. I do think he did a great job, but I think maybe it was a little bit blown out of proportion because he did have a lot of talent when he came back. I mean, I know there was a lack of O-line. I'm not trying to bring down any of his accomplishments, but I do think it's a little bit overvalued, that first year going the whole story of 1-11 to 11 wins. I think they were a bit better than a 1-win team that first year.
All right.
I just don't think they had anything emotionally in the tank.
I don't think he intentionally tanked like some people are saying.
So I think probably what he underestimated, and if we asked him this, he might even, he'll tell us what he thinks, but I think in the 1-11 year, what you probably underestimate is, all right, the last part of last season was really emotionally draining. Okay, let's restart. It'll be fine. And then when you lose to Liberty, it was just
inexcusable.
It was inexcusable. But when it happened, it was like in case of emergency, break glass. It was just like boom. That's bad.
And there might have been timing that Liberty. You shouldn't lose to Liberty if you're Baylor. You don't do that. But it might have been a timing where they were seasoned that year, and they were a lot better than they've ever been before, and they've actually been pretty good ever since, and they just hit them at the wrong time. It was just a bad mixture. It was a horrible perfect storm in a negative way.
And people don't realize or just forget that they did have a walk-on playing starting in that game in the secondary. If you remember, that's who they abused over. I can't remember the name now, but that's who Golden Gandy or whatever. Gandy Golden, I can't remember his name now. I forget who it was. We just abused the secondary the entire night.
I think because you tried to forget.
Maybe, but yeah, just saying that, they shouldn't have been as bad as 1-11, but there were reasons why they were 1-11. So I can see where you would kind of up or down Matt Rhule a little bit, depending on who you are.
We'll have Grayson at 345, 254-339-1122 on the YouTube. Travis just popped in again, and also, of course, others. Gary Barton, a 13 Mangino. He's 12-22, but my God, they were 12-1 one year.
But he was insensitive, and he said mean words.
Okay, so that's why he's 13, not like 8. Gary Barnett, now what he did was 49-38, 7 years, and ended Nebraska's
chokehold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ended it. Les Miles at 15 while he was at Oklahoma State. I disagree with this. He's 28-21. He had a Cotton Bowl appearance. Next is Tom Herman at 16. Is it 16?
I don't know how
Tom
you
Herman
can
was
put
32 he was 32-18 at Texas, and with all this, he can walk on water. And here, just you're healed. But when you think this way, then you look at who's behind him. Tell me who should be in front of him. Mike Sherman, 500 at A&M. Paul Rhoades, 32-55. Chris Kleiman. He's still 12-11.
TBD.
Neil Brown, TBD. Bill Callahan. What's amazing about this Nebraska? I would suck the blood out of my arm if they could go 27-22 in the next 4 years. But under 500 in the conference screwed them for a long time.
Yeah, Bill Callahan and what was the guy's name? Steve Peterson.
Yeah.
Steve Peterson.
They crushed
just absolutely crushed
Dennis Franchione at 23. Same thing, just above 500. Matt Wells, too early. Tommy Tuberville, 20-17. Charlie Strong.
Yeah, but Tommy Tuberville's exit, if you're going to count extracurricular things like with Bryles and use that against him, you got to talk about the NCAA stuff with Mangino, which I think some of that Kansas really blew out of proportion, and then some of it was actual, violations. But Tuberville's exit from Tech, are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
Dude left in the middle of a recruiting dinner.
But that's how bad the rest of this list is.
Yeah,
Charlie Strong, Ron Prince. Remember Terry Allen at Kansas?
I'll tell you, my favorite Ron Prince story was, and this is why he got fired, because he broke just an NCAA rule that when you break it, they're gonna come for you because a parent is gonna call. But they went on the road to Louisville. They went on the road to Louisville. Louisville's not a bad team. They got smacked around the field by Louisville. They land back in Manhattan at 3 a.m., and he has everybody get off the plane, put their sneakers on, and run stadiums on what's supposed to be their day off. That is like probably
That's what my coach would have done back in the 70s.
Yeah, but that, like, as far as the NCAA goes, you cannot do that.
No, I know.
Like,
No,
and it is one of those things you have to investigate. Did it happen? Yes. Okay, you're
Prince
fired.
did hire James Franklin as his offensive coordinator, but they didn't do much with Josh Freeman. Terry Allen, Dan Hawkins was a disaster at Colorado.
It's the Big 12.
Guy Morris at
Hey,
30.
Earls.
He was 18-40, but as Scotty mentioned, there were a couple of upsets in there for them. John Blake, 31, disaster. Gene Chizik, Iowa State, disaster, despite the fact he won a national championship at Auburn. Next up, let's see, David Beatty, disaster. 6-42. Turner Gill, 5-19. A lot of these are Kansas. Dave Roberts at 35. Kevin Steele at 36. And believe it or not, there's somebody below him named Les Miles.
Another with he sucked on the field, but so has everybody at Kansas, basically, other than Mark Mangino. But Les's indiscretions also,
that's why
come into play.
Yeah, he was there, and I thought maybe he was going to give Kansas a goose. Unfortunately, he gave everyone else one, and so he's gone.
I was torn on that initially just because it was still Kansas. Like, it was still, I just didn't believe that he was going to be able to pull talent like he was pulling at LSU or even at Oklahoma State. But I do remember, initially there was some buzz for that. But, man, that buzz went away really quick.
Charlie Weiss is dead last. Disaster.
I'm going to bring up 2 points here. I want to talk about Charlie Weiss, but here's the last 6. Kansas, Baylor, Kansas.
That makes sense.
And that pretty much tracks with the history of the conference, But Charlie Weiss at Big 12 Media Days, his first year, I was outside, and he was giving his, the scrum talk. And someone asked him, how do you get players to come to Kansas when they haven't before? And his answer was, well, they'll go to Kansas State. They'll go to Iowa State. They'll go to Oklahoma State. Why wouldn't they come here? And the reporter's like, well, dude, that's what I'm asking you. Like, what do you, what are you trying to highlight about Kansas? And Charlie took it to mean, like, listen, every other city in the Big 12 is kind of in the middle of nowhere, small college town. Like, why wouldn't they come to Lawrence? And again, the guy's like, no. What I'm saying is, what do you have to change about the culture? And he's like, no. And he just did not get it. And I knew from that point on, this is about to be a disaster, because Charlie Weiss hasn't noticed that there's nothing that something's wrong with the way that they handle football. And that reporter was asking, what do you need to change about the way that your university handles football,
right,
so that you can be good again?
Yeah, he kept, okay. So that's the list. You have to be a member of theathletic.com to read it, but I just gave it to you. We just gave it to you. So we'll see what happens with that. High school baseball real quick, and I have no idea what the weather. Crawford in baseball beaten by Lindsay, 2 straight games. Bosqueville tonight supposed to play in Weatherford. Game 3 of their best of 3 with Windthorst. They came back to win last night 7-2. Yo and Buna, game 2 tomorrow. Buna up 1-0. Softball. Lake Belton is up 1-0 in their series against Liberty. Game 2 tonight. We hope all of them play. And Crawford came back to beat Italy in the second game. They'll play tomorrow morning in West at 11 o'clock. Those are the teams left in baseball and softball. All right? We will, Mavericks again, game 3 tonight. We've mentioned the coaching hires in the Big 12. Friday is kind of churning along. Still, there's no additions to Nicki Collen's staff and the Lady Bears. She had mentioned she had hoped to have that done by the end of the week. I have not been able to get any feedback that might happen. Maybe it will at some point. All right? Anything else? Make sure I do mention Ronnie Crumpton. We will hear from Danny Servants, who was hired by Ellison. We set that up for 4:45. But coming up next,